If you put a mic in front of a singer and simply record it, or put it straight through your sound reinforcement system, that's what's called a raw, unprocessed signal. But there's lots you can do to both colour and process that signal before the audience actually gets to hear it. You can get rid of unwanted background noise, you can add reverb to it, make it punchier, add some echo, maybe even make it sound like it's been generated by a synthesizer. All such things we tend to lump under the heading of adding effects. Effects are tools. Sometimes you'll find a range of them built into the mixer. Sometimes you'll need to purchase and plug in a specific effects processor. Effects can broadly be divided up into two categories: signal controlling effects and signal processing effects. And in fact, signal processing can be further divided up into special effects and spatial effects. Signal controlling effects are simply used to manage sound. Why does sound need managing? Well, say you want to make a sound more consistent in volume, minimize the peaks and troughs. Effects that squeeze or compress the dynamic range of a signal in order to do this are called compressors. Or perhaps you want to be safe and put an absolute limit on the level of a sound in order to safeguard against overloading, something that could certainly severely damage your equipment. In this case, you would use a limiter. Perhaps there's a bunch of other noise or audio going on around the sound you want to amplify. No problem. There are devices that employ an electronic gate that opens to let your sound through and then closes as soon as it goes below a certain level in order to keep out that background noise. And these are called noise gates. Hey, finally we've come across a whole range of sound reinforcement equipment that actually has names that mean something. Without a compressor, you can always do this. That's right. The job of a compressor is to smooth out inconsistencies in level. And you could, if you're extremely quick, do what's called ride the gain. Alternatively, when it comes to compressing vocals, you could just hope that you have a real pro singer with a great mic technique. An actual compressor is probably a safer bet though. Compressors are connected directly to the channel or signal that you want to compress. The nature of the effect is such that every sound that needs compressing should have its own compressor or compressor channel, because the settings need to be adjusted individually to suit that particular sound. The first adjustment to make is the threshold, the level above which you'd like to hear your sound to be reduced in volume. In effect, this is like an engineer yanking down the fader every time he sees the signal go above a certain point. Okay, but how far down is he yanking that fader? On a compressor, this is stated as ratio. A 2:1 setting will make a 2 dB increase in the sound only increase by 1 dB. This would be called fairly gentle compression. And this would be a good starting point for a vocalist. A 6:1 ratio, on the other hand, will produce considerably greater level squashing. You might use a setting like this with a kick drum to make a punchier sound. So we've seen the when, and by how much. How about the how fast? Depending upon the model, you may also have control over how fast compression is initiated, governed by the attack control, and how fast normal uncompressed levels will resume, governed by the release control. A fast attack is probably best with a vocal, where you want to keep the sound as natural as possible. If you're compressing a kick drum though, you might want a slower attack, so the percussive front end of the sound still has time to be heard before the compression actually kicks in. If a signal seems to be pumping, or you can hear the gain being adjusted by the compressor, your release time is probably too short. These are just the basics of using a compressor. There's a lot more to learn, and a lot of good material out there on the web or in book form to turn you into an expert. If you set a really high ratio on a compressor, say 15:1 or something, you are in effect putting up a brick wall against signal overload, and this is then called limiting. Sometimes a limiter is built into an amp or a powered mixer. You can also find dedicated standalone limiters, and certainly there are quite a few limiter plugins on the market for studio use, but most likely you'll find limiting facilities for live sound on one compressor limiter unit. Compressor limiters are generally connected to an individual channel. Large touring rigs encompass a range of effects from compression and limiting to EQ that would be applied to the mix as a whole. This has a dual function, both as a safeguard against dangerous level spikes that could damage loudspeakers and as a fine-tuning device to tailor a mix for a particular room or setting. Effects for this purpose will be connected in line between your mixer's output and your amplifier's input.